I was out of town for 3 days when my wife hosted a family dinner without telling me. It sounded harmless, until her mother said one sentence that ended my marriage. My name is Daniel. I was 38 at the time this happened. I grew up in Ohio, the oldest of three, raised in a house where showing up mattered more than talking things through. I worked in logistics management for a mid-sized manufacturing company, the kind of job that rewarded consistency and punished distraction. I married Laura when I was 33. She was sharp, funny, and disarming in a quiet way. People trusted her quickly. I trusted her completely. We had been married just over 4 years, no kids yet, and lived in a modest house outside Columbus with a maple tree in the front yard that shed like it was trying to escape. By most measures, my life was steady. That mattered to me. I had spent years building something that didn't shake easily. I was out of town for 3 days when everything tilted. The trip itself was forgettable. A vendor issue in St. Louis that required my physical presence, a hotel room that smelled faintly of cleaner and old carpet, dinners eaten alone while scrolling emails. I talked to Laura each night. Short calls, normal calls. She told me her mother had come by one evening, that there was talk of a family dinner while I was gone. I remember smiling at that, half listening while folding a shirt I wouldn't end up wearing. Family dinners were her thing. They exhausted me, but I knew better than to complain. On the second night, she mentioned in passing that her ex, Mark, had reached out to her mother, said he'd been asking how everyone was doing. That caught my attention, but only briefly. Mark had been part of her life for a long time. They'd dated on and off in their 20s. The kind of relationship that lingered in the background like an unfinished sentence. Still, she had never given me reason to worry. I trusted the boundaries we had built together. I flew home early on the 4th day. My flight landed just after noon. I remember feeling relieved as the plane touched down, like I could finally breathe normally again. I texted Laura that I was on my way. No response. I didn't think much of it. She worked from home some days and lost track of time easily. When I pulled into the driveway, there were more cars than usual. Her mother's SUV, her sister's sedan, and Mark's old gray Civic, parked a little crooked at the curb. I sat there longer than I needed to, engine still running, hand resting on the gear shift. I told myself not to read into it. I reminded myself that families were messy, that past relationships didn't automatically mean present danger. Still, something in my chest tightened, slow and deliberate. Inside, the house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. Voices drifted from the dining room. Laughter. The clink of glasses. It sounded warm. Familiar. Almost rehearsed. I stepped in quietly, setting my bag down by the stairs. No one noticed me at first. I stood there, half in the hallway, listening. Laura's laugh was easy to spot. So was Mark's voice. Lower than I remembered. Confident in a way that suggested he felt entitled to be there. I walked into the dining room. The table was full. Plates already served. Laura sat at the head, her hand resting on the back of her mother's chair. Mark sat 2 seats down from her, leaning in as he spoke, like he belonged in the frame. Everyone turned when they saw me. Surprise flickered across a few faces. Laura's eyes widened, then softened too quickly. "Dan," she said, "you're home early." Her tone was light. Too light. I nodded, forcing a smile. Flight got in ahead of schedule. Her mother stood immediately, wiping her hands on a napkin, coming toward me with open arms. She hugged me longer than usual. Her embrace felt stiff, like she was trying to anchor something in place. "Sit," she said. "You must be starving." I wasn't hungry. I took the empty chair anyway. Dinner resumed with forced momentum. People asked about my trip. I answered in fragments. Mark nodded along as if he knew the details already, as if he'd been briefed. I watched Laura carefully. She avoided my eyes. When she did look at me, there was something else there. Not guilt exactly, more like anticipation. Halfway through the meal, her mother cleared her throat. "You know," she said, cutting into the rhythm of conversation, "it's funny how life circles back sometimes." The table went quiet. Forks paused midair. She smiled at Mark, then at Laura. "Some connections don't really disappear," she continued. "They just wait for the right time." I felt it then. The shift. Like a pressure drop. Laura's face changed. Color drained from her cheeks. She shook her head slightly, a silent plea. Her mother didn't notice. Or didn't care. "I always thought you two were unfinished business," she said, nodding between them. "And seeing you both here tonight, it just feels right." Laura's chair scraped back abruptly. She stood, hands clenched at her sides. "Mom," she said sharply. "Stop." Her voice cracked. The room held its breath. Mark looked uncomfortable now, eyes darting between us. Her sister stared at her plate. No one spoke. Laura turned and left the room. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing to assemble something coherent from the wreckage. Her mother looked confused, offended even. "What?" she said. I didn't say anything wrong. I excused myself without meeting anyone's eyes. Laura was in the bedroom, pacing. She stopped when she saw me, her face collapsing into something raw and unguarded. "I didn't know she was going to say that," she said quickly. "I swear." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. "Why was he here?" I asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, ran a hand through her hair. "It was supposed to be harmless," she said. "Just dinner. Just catching up." "With your ex," I said quietly. "With my family," she corrected, too fast. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She glanced at it, then looked back at me. "I need a minute," she said. "I need to call you later. I can't do this right now." I stared at her. "I'm here." "I know," she said, voice tight. "That's why I can't." She grabbed her phone and stepped past me, locking herself in the bathroom. I stood alone in our bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of a life I thought I understood. The bed unmade, the framed photos on the dresser, the quiet hum of the house beyond the door. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was Laura. I answered. "Dan," she said, her voice trembling. "By the time you get this, I don't know how to explain it, but it's already too late." The line went dead. And in that moment, standing in the center of the room we had built together, I understood that whatever had been unfolding in my absence wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision, and I hadn't been part of it. I didn't move for a long time after the call ended. I stood there with my phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. No dial tone, no footsteps, just the faint sound of voices downstairs, pretending nothing had cracked open. Eventually, I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under my weight in a way that felt unfamiliar, like it no longer recognized me. I tried to slow my breathing. I tried to tell myself that this could still be explained, that people misspeak, that mothers overstep, that nothing truly irreversible happens in a single sentence. But Laura didn't come back into the room. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I heard the front door open and close. I heard Mark's car start outside. Tires on pavement. Gone. Her sister left shortly after. A muffled goodbye. A forced laugh. The house thinned out until only her mother's voice remained, drifting in and out of earshot as she cleaned up the dinner she'd so proudly orchestrated. Laura still didn't come out. When she finally did, it was close to an hour later. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red, but dry. She looked resolved in a way that made my stomach drop. "We need to talk," she said. I nodded once. I didn't trust my voice. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd planned vacations, argued about paint colors, signed refinance papers. She folded her hands together, then unfolded them. "Did it again. I didn't plan for it to happen like this," she said. I waited. "My mom inviting him," she continued. "That wasn't supposed to mean anything. I thought it would feel different." "Different how?" I asked. She hesitated, looked past me, toward the window. "I thought seeing him again would make it obvious that it was over," she said. "That whatever we had was finished. I wanted closure. And did you get it?" Her jaw tightened. "No," she said. I realized it never really closed. The words settled between us, heavy and deliberate. "How long?" I asked. She flinched. "Since you've been gone." "Since before, if I'm being honest with myself. Not physically, not until recently, but emotionally it's been there." I leaned back in my chair. The wood creaked under the shift in weight. "You didn't think that was something I deserved to know?" I asked. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said quickly. I didn't know how to say it without blowing everything up. And inviting him to dinner was the safer option? I said. Her eyes filled again. "I didn't invite him. My mom did. I didn't stop it." That distinction hung there, thin and fragile. "So what now?" I asked. She swallowed. "I don't know." That was the answer that broke something in me. For years, Laura had been the person with plans, lists, contingencies. She was decisive when things mattered. Watching her sit there, stripped of that certainty, told me more than any confession could. "You called me," I said. "From the bathroom. You said it was too late." She nodded slowly. I realized when she said it out loud, Laura said, when my mom did, that I wasn't fighting it anymore. That part of me was relieved someone else named it. I closed my eyes. So what does that mean for us? I asked. She didn't answer right away. I care about you, she said finally. Deeply. You're my husband. You've been good to me. You've given me stability and kindness and… But, I said. But I can't keep pretending that's enough, she finished. The word pretending echoed in my head. I thought of the calls from the hotel. Her voice, calm and affectionate. I thought of the way she'd said his name so casually the night before. Like it didn't carry weight. Did anything happen while I was gone? I asked. She shook her head. Too quickly. Not then, she said. After. Tonight. My hands curled into fists under the table. So dinner, I said. Your mother's speech. That wasn't a coincidence. No, she whispered. She's known longer than you think. That was the moment anger arrived. Not sharp or explosive. Just cold. You told her before you told me. I said. I needed someone to talk to, Laura said. I was confused. And I wasn't an option? I asked. She reached across the table, then stopped herself halfway. I didn't want you to look at me differently, she said. I almost laughed. That's exactly what this does, I said. It changes everything. Silence stretched again. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Normal sounds in a house that no longer felt like mine. What do you want? I asked. She took a long breath. I want time, she said. I want space to figure out what I'm feeling without making decisions out of panic. And what am I supposed to do while you figure that out? I asked. She didn't meet my eyes. I don't know, she said again. That answer landed harder the second time. I stood up. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floor. I can't stay here tonight, I said. I need distance too. She looked up then, alarm flickering across her face. Dan, please, she said. Don't make this worse. I grabbed my overnight bag from the hallway. This is already worse, I said. I'm not the one who did that. Her mother appeared in the doorway, hands clasped together, face tight, with concern that felt performative. Daniel, she said. Let's all take a breath. Emotions are high. I looked at her then. Really looked. You don't get to moderate this, I said quietly. You lit the match. Her mouth opened, then closed. I walked out without another word. I drove for nearly an hour before pulling over. Ended up at a rest stop off the interstate, sitting in my car under harsh fluorescent lights, trying to make sense of how quickly my life had slipped sideways. I called my brother. He answered on the second ring. Hey, he said. What's going on? I told him enough to explain why I needed a couch for the night. I didn't give details. I didn't have them organized yet. I slept poorly. Woke up before dawn with a headache and a hollow ache in my chest that didn't fade with coffee. Laura texted me that morning. I'm sorry. Please don't shut me out. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I need time too, I wrote. We'll talk later. The next few days blurred together. I went to work, answered emails, nodded through meetings. Everything moved forward as if nothing had changed, which felt like a personal insult. Laura and I spoke once, briefly. She told me she'd asked Mark for space, that she wasn't making any decisions yet, that she wanted us to consider counseling. I listened. I said very little. What she didn't say mattered more. She didn't say she had chosen me. By the fourth day, I went back to the house to collect more clothes. Laura wasn't there. Her mother's SUV was gone too. The silence inside felt staged, like a set after actors had cleared. I walked through the room slowly, noticing things I'd ignored before. Photos that hadn't been updated in years. A drawer in her desk that locked. I didn't open it. I packed what I needed and left a note on the counter. I'm staying with my brother for now. We need to have an honest conversation soon. I didn't know then how soon that conversation would come, or how violently it would arrive. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever Laura was undecided about, I was not. And the longer she hesitated, the further away I moved, even if neither of us had fully realized it yet. The call came 2 nights later. It was just after midnight. I had fallen into that shallow, restless sleep where your body is exhausted but your mind keeps pacing. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. Laura's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a full 5 seconds before answering. Hello, I said. She was crying. Not quietly. Not carefully. The kind of crying that scrapes its way out of your chest when you've lost control of the narrative you thought you were managing. Dan, she said, my name breaking in half. I need you. Please. I sat up, already awake now. What happened? There was a pause. A shaky breath. It's my mom, she said. She said something to him. To Mark. Something she shouldn't have. My stomach tightened. What did she say? She told him I was going to choose him, Laura said. That I'd already decided. That I was just trying to let you down gently. I closed my eyes. And did you? I asked. No, she said quickly. I mean, I don't know. I didn't say that. I never said that. But she told him I had. And now he's upset. He thinks I lied to him. There it was. The real emergency. Not me leaving. Not our marriage hanging by a thread. But the fact that the other man now felt uncertain. You called me, I said slowly. Because your ex is angry. That's not fair, she said, her voice sharp through the tears. Everything is blowing up at once. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The room felt small, like the walls were listening. Laura, I said, what exactly do you want from me right now? She hesitated. I could hear her breathing on the other end. I want you to come home, she said. We need to talk before this gets worse. Worse for who? I asked. For everyone, she said. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty, washed in orange light from a lone street lamp. Your mother already made sure it got worse, I said. She just said the quiet part out loud. She didn't mean it like that, Laura insisted. She thought she was helping. She was choosing, I said. Just like you have been. That's not true, she said, her voice rising. I've been trying not to choose. I've been trying to be careful. Careful would have been honesty, I said. Careful would have been telling me before I got on a plane. She started crying harder then, saying my name again and again like repetition might soften it. I'm losing control of this, she said. I didn't want it to happen this way. That's the thing, I said. It happened anyway. There was a long silence. Are you saying you're done? She asked quietly. I leaned my forehead against the glass. I'm saying I can't keep standing still while everyone else decides my place for me, I said. She didn't respond right away. My mom told him you'd never forgive me, Laura said finally. That you'd walk away the second you felt threatened. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Funny. She got one thing right. Dan, I didn't walk away because I felt threatened, I said. I walked away because I felt dismissed. Another pause. This one heavier. Did you sleep with him? I asked. The line went very quiet. After you left, she said. Yes. The word landed cleanly. No drama. No build-up. Just fact. I nodded to myself. Thank you for telling me, I said. That's it, she asked, panicked now. That's all you're going to say? I don't know what else there is, I said. You made a choice. Maybe not consciously, but you did. I didn't mean for it to mean this, she said. It was complicated. It always is, I said. That doesn't make it unclear. She started talking quickly then, explaining, rewinding, trying to reframe the sequence of events like it was still editable. I let her finish. When she stopped, I said, I'm not coming home tonight. Or tomorrow. What about counseling? She asked. We said we'd try. I don't go to counseling to convince someone to want me, I said. That's not how it works. Her breathing hitched. So you're just giving up, she said. No, I said. I'm letting go. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I sat there for a long time afterward, phone still in my hand, heart pounding but strangely steady. There was grief, yes, and anger, but underneath it, something else had settled in. Clarity. The next morning, her mother called me. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message anyway. Long controlled, framed as concern. She said she never intended to hurt anyone, that she believed in truth, that sometimes adults needed help acknowledging what they already knew. She said Laura was fragile, confused, that pushing too hard might drive her away from everyone. What she didn't say was my name. I didn't call her back. That afternoon, Laura sent a final message. I don't recognize myself right now. I'm scared. I wish you'd fight for us. I read it once. Then again. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. What I finally sent was short. I did fight. I just didn't do it loudly. I blocked her number after that. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. The house was listed the following week. She moved in with her sister. Mark didn't last long after the initial adrenaline faded. I heard that later, through mutual friends who didn't know what to say when they ran into me. Her mother stopped speaking to me entirely. That hurt less than I expected. What hurt more was the quiet realization that the moment she hesitated, really hesitated, I had already lost something I couldn't recover. Trust doesn't shatter all at once. It erodes. And by the time you notice the ground giving way beneath you, there's nothing solid left to stand on. By the time Laura called me that night, frantic and unraveling, it really was already too late. She just hadn't caught up to that truth yet. And neither, at first, had I. The weeks after I blocked Laura felt unreal, like I had stepped out of my own life and left someone else to finish it. I went through the motions with the precision of habit. Wake up, shower, drive to work, answer questions, come home to my brother's spare room and stare at the ceiling until sleep eventually took me. People noticed, of course. You can only hollow yourself out so much before it shows. My brother didn't press. He had always been good at that. He brought home takeout on nights when I forgot to eat. He left the TV on low, like noise might keep my thoughts from getting too loud. The first real crack came when I went back to the house alone. The realtor had scheduled a walkthrough. Laura wasn't there. I was grateful for that. Walking into the place without her felt like entering a museum exhibit about a life that no longer existed. Everything was still where we'd left it, but the meaning had drained out of it. I moved slowly from room to room, touching the back of a chair, the edge of the counter, little anchors I hadn't realized I relied on. In the bedroom, I opened the closet and pulled out the last of my things. A jacket, a pair of boots, a watch I hadn't worn since before we got married. At the bottom of a drawer, I found a folded envelope with my name on it. Laura's handwriting. I sat on the bed before opening it. I already knew I didn't want to read it, but I did anyway. She wrote about confusion, about fear, about how she had never meant to hurt me. She wrote that Mark had represented a version of herself she was afraid she'd lost. That being with me had felt safe, but safety sometimes felt like standing still. She said she hoped one day I would understand. I folded the letter back into the envelope and left it on the nightstand. I didn't tear it up. I didn't take it with me. I just left it there where it belonged. A week later, the paperwork started. Lawyers, emails, forms that asked you to reduce your life to boxes and signatures. It was efficient in a way that felt cruel. There was no space for grief in legal language. No checkbox for betrayal. Laura tried once more to reach me through email. A neutral account. Careful wording. I'm not asking you to change your mind, she wrote. I just want to talk without anger. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing my laptop. Anger wasn't the problem anymore. The problem was that every conversation felt like it would require me to pretend something hadn't happened, to soften the edges, to make it easier for everyone else to live with. I wasn't willing to do that again. Her mother made one last attempt too. She cornered me outside my office one afternoon, having somehow found out where I worked. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. I never wanted to be the villain, she said. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Villains usually don't, I said. They just want the story to end in a way they can live with. She started to cry then. Real tears this time. She said she was scared of losing her daughter, that she thought pushing things into the open would force clarity. It did, I said. Just not the kind you wanted. I walked away before she could say anything else. What surprised me most was how quiet everything became after that. No more messages. No more explanations. No more apologies disguised as insight. Just space. At first, the silence was unbearable. It magnified everything. Every memory echoed louder. Every unanswered question lingered longer. Then, slowly, the silence changed. It became room. I started running again. Early mornings, before work. Letting my lungs burn until my thoughts finally gave up chasing me. I cooked real meals instead of eating whatever was convenient. I called friends I had let drift when my world had narrowed down to one person. Some nights were still hard. Certain songs, certain streets, certain turns of phrase that pulled me backward without warning. But the ache softened, not because it stopped mattering, but because I stopped fighting it. One evening, months later, I ran into Mark at a grocery store. We froze when we saw each other. Two men orbiting the same wreckage from opposite sides. He looked thinner, tired. I didn't know she'd told you, he said quietly. About that night. I know, I said. He nodded, eyes dropping to the floor. I didn't think it would end like this, he said. None of us do, I replied. There was nothing else to say. When I left the store, I realized my hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. He was just a man now. Not a symbol, not a threat, just someone who had been part of a chapter that was over. That night, sitting alone in my new apartment, I understood something that had taken me months to reach. I hadn't lost Laura all at once. I had lost her in pieces. In the pauses, in the indecision, in the way she let other people speak for her instead of choosing her own words. By the time everything exploded, there was very little left to save. And for the first time since it all began, That realization didn't hurt. It just felt true. A year passed before I realized I had stopped measuring time by the moment everything fell apart. That surprised me. For a long while, every date had been relative. Before the trip, after the dinner, weeks since the call, months since I left. It all revolved around the same axis, like my life had stalled there and refused to move forward. Then one morning, I woke up and didn't think about her first. I noticed it while brushing my teeth. The thought arrived quietly, without celebration or relief. Just an observation, like realizing a bruise no longer hurt unless you pressed on it. My apartment had begun to feel like mine by then. Not a temporary landing spot, not a holding cell, just a place. I had hung a few photos, bought a couch I actually liked instead of one we compromised on. The walls were bare in a way that felt intentional, not unfinished. I still thought about Laura sometimes, usually in small, unexpected ways. Passing a restaurant we used to like, hearing a phrase she used to repeat, seeing a woman with the same stride from behind, and feeling my chest tighten for half a second before my brain caught up. But the thoughts no longer demanded anything from me. I ran into her sister once at a bookstore. She looked startled when she saw me, then unsure how to behave, like she was standing between two versions of the same story. "She's doing okay," she said, as if offering a peace treaty. I nodded. I hope so. That was the truth. Not forgiveness. Not longing. Just acceptance that whatever path Laura was on now no longer intersected with mine. Later that night, I thought about the version of myself who would have dissected that encounter for hours. Wondered what okay really meant. Imagined conversations that weren't happening. Instead, I made dinner, ate, went for a walk. Life, it turned out, was persistent. The final piece came quietly too. I was sitting on my balcony one evening, watching the city settle into itself. Lights flicking on, distant sirens, ordinary motion. I realized I no longer needed an ending that made sense. For a long time, I had wanted a clean explanation. A moment where everything lined up and revealed itself as necessary. A reason that justified the pain. Her hesitation, her mother's interference, the timing of it all. But some things don't resolve that way. Some things just end. What mattered more was what I had learned about myself in the space that followed. I learned that I didn't disappear when my marriage did. That I could stand in uncertainty without bargaining for scraps of clarity. That wanting to be chosen wasn't weakness, and walking away when you weren't wasn't failure. I learned that silence can be kinder than conversation when words are only being used to soften consequences. And I learned that by the time someone asks you to wait while they decide if you're enough, the decision has already been made. It just hasn't been spoken yet. On the anniversary of the dinner, the one date I still remembered without trying, I took the day off work, drove out of the city, ended up at a small lake I'd never been to before, sat on a bench with a coffee that had gone cold, and watched the water ripple under a gray sky. I thought about who I had been when I boarded that plane a year earlier. Certain, trusting, comfortable in the assumption that commitment meant mutual protection. I wasn't angry with that man. He had loved honestly. That counted. I stood up eventually and walked back to my car. There was no dramatic release. No final thought that tied it all together. Just the quiet understanding that my life was no longer defined by what I had lost. It was defined by what I had refused to lose myself over. And that, finally, was enough.